Say what's cracking, YouTube. So this is part 2 of the video that I was doing earlier, how I got life and how I got out. Actually, I know y'all seen me sweating up in the car, man. It's so hot out here in this California heat that the dang phone cut off because it was too hot. But anyway, let me get back to where I was at. What I was explaining to you guys was how the Marsy law was enacted. Now, what the Marsy law was, and I don't remember the exact year, maybe 2008, 2009, but certain components of the Marsy law now allow the parole board to give an individual a 3-year, 5-year, 7-year, 10-year, or even a 15-year denial at his parole hearing. So that would be another 15 years before you could even come back. Now, initially, before the Marsy law was enacted, in my situation, like I explained to you guys, I went to trial. I got a life sentence actually behind attempted murder. My life sentence came behind an attempted murder. So due to that fact, before the Marsy law was voted in, I was eligible to go to the parole board after I had served, I believe, maybe 15 or 16 years, but whatever it was, I was eligible to go to the parole board every year. But once the Marsy law was voted in, I could go to the parole board, and depending on their decision, they could give me a 3-year denial, tell me to come back in 5 years, which they did one time, or tell me to come back in 7, 10. I even seen a couple dudes get a 15-year denial. So now, imagine doing 15, 20 years in prison. And I believe it's much easier when you're doing a prison sentence, and at least you know when you're going to get out. But when you have life, or as what they call it in California, indeterminate sentence, when you do not know when you're getting out, I think that makes things extremely harder. So imagine you already have done 15 to 20 years. You go to the parole board, and they tell you come back in 5 more years. They tell you come back in 7 years. That's a whole nother sentence, And so keep in mind that when individuals like myself first came to prison, the parole board was denying everybody. And so this was known. And so this plays an important part into a person's mentality about how he goes about even doing his time. Now you're not even trying to stay out of trouble because there is no reason to stay out of trouble, especially when they put you in a level 4 maximum security prison with the worst of the worst convicts in the state of California. Most people's main goal would be to survive. You have to survive. And so if that means you have to stab somebody, then that's what you have to do. Prison is a predatory place. It's predatory by nature. And no matter how nice of a guy in there you try to be, at some point in time, a person is going to try you and you're going to be forced to react. And let me give you another scenario. Now, say you hanging out on the yard. I'm a black convict, right? I could be a non-affiliate, just hanging out on the yard. In the event a racial riot jumps off, whoever the riot is between, if it's between the blacks and the Hispanics aren't going to run up to me during this riot and say, hey, well, that's chill. He's a Christian. He doesn't gangbang. They're going to be on my helmet, though, trying to kill me like they're trying to kill anybody else. So it comes to a point now, you have to participate in these riots just for the sake of survival. Some people may participate with more passion than others, but you at least gonna have to participate for your survival. So in the event someone happens to approach you, and you're basically fighting to try to get these people up off you, and a CO happens to see you, he may happen to know you from your building or whatever, and he writes you up for participation in a riot. That was something that the board was going to use to deny you. Hey, man, you're still participating in these riots. You still have a convict mentality. They didn't want to hear that you was fighting for your life, even though they very well know the makeup of a California riot. But yet and still, they used all these things, like small things like this, to basically deny you and to continue to lengthen your time. And then, like I said, initially when I first came in anyway, they was given blanket denials. Some of these governors, like I told you, at some point in time, California also voted in where the governors had the final say. So if you go to your parole hearing, the people on the parole panel find you suitable for parole, it would take you about 5 months to get out because the paperwork had to go through these certain channels, and the T's had to be crossed, I's had to be dotted, things of that nature. But one of the final stages was the governor would then review the finding of the parole board. And he may say, oh, no, even though he appointed these people to sit on the parole board, he going to say, no, I disagree with their findings. And he could reverse their decision. And then, of course, you had to go through the process all over again. It may take you another year or two to get in front of the parole board. And there were several convicts who this scenario happened to. Like I say, one being this lady by the name of Sandra Loris Davis. And so she filed a lawsuit, and eventually the lawsuit was ruled in her favor that they could no longer deny you parole on the basis of your crime alone. They still had to they had to prove that you posed a threat to society. And so it was a few things like this that was really instrumental in helping all lifers gain parole. Because like I told you, some of the Pete Wilson, I believe he may have, in his whole term, he may have paroled, I believe, I got it written down here somewhere because I wanted to have this information correct for you guys. He paroled 8 lifers in 5 years. I believe Gray Davis might have paroled 3 lifers, and all of them were women who happened to kill their, who claimed they was being abused and stuff. So, but so how I ended up getting out is, like I say, a lot of these lawsuits that was then filed by these people who had been unfairly denied parole, they started, because if like I told you, the Sandra Lawrence Davis lady, when she filed an appeal, the ruling on her case applied to everybody. So those things like that made it extremely helpful. And so slowly but surely, also too, the parole board started being revamped. A lot of the commissioners on the parole board who had extremely unusual high numbers of denying people, they were removed. They were retrained. Their system was revamped. And then also, like I was telling you guys, I believe in the last video, there came a law that was called the Youth Offender Parole Hearing. And that law was basically giving people, initially it was if you had committed a crime under the age of 18. But then eventually it was, after a few years, it was moved up due to a scientific study to if you committed a crime under the age of 26, because the certain areas of your brain that make you have a better appreciation for the consequences to your crime had not matured yet. So that was another law that was instrumental. But now also, like I was telling you guys too, another thing, at that point in time, once all those laws changed, it was in the hands of the convict or the prisoner more than ever. His parole was in his own hands now, because you also, one of the requirements was you also had to remain disciplinary free for 5 years. And like I was telling you guys, only like 1/3 of the inmate population has life, so there are way more convicts who don't have life. And it's sad to say, but because you think that we'd all be in the same boat, but we're not. Everybody don't have empathy for the next prisoner. And so there would be some people who may know that you have life, may know that you're getting ready to go to a parole hearing, and I definitely believe that they would try to test you in ways they possibly wouldn't, knowing that, because if they get into a fight, they just stay out of trouble for 30 days, they get their time back, they go right back home. But for anyone who was serving a life sentence, and like I spoke of earlier, by you being into a fight, it's showing that you're still a threat to society. And so this is something that would definitely hinder you at the parole board and could cause you to get a 5-year, 7-year denial possibly. It all depends on how the person on the parole board was feeling that day. And so it became extremely hard sometimes, to stay out of trouble, because prison is also a spontaneous place. Like I said, you could just be minding your business and a race riot break out. Now you have no choice but to participate or to possibly do not participate, and you get hurt during the time of the riot. Or maybe you escape that, you don't get hurt. Then you have people who noticed in the riot that you did not participate, noticed that you was hiding under the table, or you was hiding under some bleachers or some benches. they're definitely going to call you out. They're definitely going to expose you. And whenever that yard comes back out for a normal program, which means going to the yard, going to the works, everyone who did not participate was more than likely going to be victimized, abused, and stabbed by their own race, because you're viewed now like you're letting down your race. Because like I say, once it goes into, a racial riot, it's race against race. It doesn't matter that you may or may not be affiliated. So you was definitely going to be viewed as a person who didn't stand up, and you was going to be assaulted. So now a person come to assault you. Now you're trying to defend yourself, and so you could possibly get in trouble for that and getting written up for that. So it was kind of like it was like a no-win situation, pretty much. You know what I'm saying? So all these things played a part in getting parole. So you got to stay out of trouble. You got to be disciplinary free. Then, of course, when you go have your parole hearing, by them revamping everything, it really gave the convicts a fair shot. Especially along with that, if you happen to fall under the youth offender parole hearing. And so basically, they just wanted to know, who you were at the time you committed the crime and who you are today. Let me get some information for you guys. A lot of people made the mistake of going in there trying to have a basically like a retrial. That the parole board isn't an opportunity to go in there and have a brand new hearing over there, because okay, listen, once you get found guilty, you then have an appeal. Now, you take your course through the appeal courts. You take your trial through the appeal courts. Whatever decision the appeal court ended up finding on, once you was all said and done with all your number of different levels of the appeal, is pretty much what the parole board was gonna believe. So, for you to go in there and be argumentative, for you to go in there and be confrontational, for you to go in there and be in denial, it meant you was gonna get denied. But some people still made that mistake. They still wanted to go in there. They felt that it was unjust. They wanted to go in there and argue, and so the board would use that as an excuse to say you're not ready. So like I was saying, basically what the board wanted, they wanted to know who you were at the time the crime was committed and who you are today. So for a quick example, hey, you tell them, listen, when that crime was committed, I was a juvenile, I was a teenager, I was immature, I was impulsive, I was uncaring. Today, I'm a mature person. I care for others. I think I'm a grown person. I no longer submit to the will of others. I'm my own man. And pretty much that, in a nutshell, and was as long as you explained it in your own way, was the key to getting a person out. Now, if you wanted to go in there and say, okay, hey, they said I drove away in a red Firebird, and actually it was a red Corvette. If you wanted to go in there and clarify certain things of the record, you could do that too. But like I say, the smartest thing to do was just to go in there and submit to the record. Whatever they found, because, like I say, whatever they found, the appeal court found to be true, yes, I submit to that. And there's no need to argue, because now it comes down to, do you want to continue to stay in prison, or do you want to come home? You've already done 20-some years. But I've seen a lot of people whose criminal mentality kept them in jail many, many years longer than they had to be, because they wanted to go in there and argue or whatever, So that wasn't the case. I seen dudes go in there and deny the crime, deny committing the crime at that they was charged for. And now, many, many years before all this revamping process happened, that would have been a death sentence in a parole board. But once it changed, that even was okay. You could have went in there and said, well, listen, I was not involved in this crime at all. I had nothing to do with this, but I was a gang member. There was other crimes that I had committed and was not charged with. I still was a very violent, dangerous person. I still was uncaring. I still was willing to harm a person if I saw fit. I was a very selfish individual. Things like that showed the board you at least had insight is what the board wanted to know. It's what the board wanted to know the most. Did you have insight on who you were? And they wanted to know about the causative factors that led to your crime. For instance, some of the causative factors you could tell them was my mentality. Also because I carried weapons on a daily basis. Also because I was a gang member. The people that I hung around with and my belief system is what led to this. Now today I have changed this, I have changed this, I have changed this. And those are the type of things that the board wanted to know, that you had insight about. And then also they had what is a it's a psych report. Anytime you're getting ready to have a parole hearing, you would go see the psych. The psych would evaluate you, ask you a bunch of questions, and um, the psych the psych's final evaluation of you was extremely important on whether you got released or not. You could get a low, a medium, or a high in terms of his opinion on whether you would reoffend or not. If he gave you anything other than a high, you definitely could come home, you know. And so these are some of the things, like I say, that helped me eventually get released from prison. And also the climate was different, among the convicts. And like I say, when I first came in, they wasn't letting anyone out. But once they started and people started seeing, maybe like 2009, 2010, on an extremely large scale, people with life was getting released, the climate changed. Now you had dudes in prison advising other people to stay out of trouble, because they knew that you had a chance of going home. As opposed to when I first came, you'd have a lot of people would say, "Oh man, if I had life, I'd do this, I'd do that." A lot of them really wouldn't do it, but they'd just be saying that. They was always an excuse. If they had a friend who had life, they expected that friend to go do something that they wouldn't do, just because they assumed he was never going home. And my thinking was always the opposite. My thinking was like this: since you know exactly when you're going home, and if you go and get some trouble, all you have to do is stay out of trouble for 60 days and get your time back. Um, if I get in some trouble, this is going to be used against me for years and years and years to come. But so what makes you think just because I'm not going home, I don't want to go home? So, you had a lot of people in there, man, hiding behind certain mentalities, hiding behind certain things, and so it made no sense to me. But like I was explaining to you guys also, I've seen now that the parole board has changed. I've seen dudes who actually came to jail charged with a murder end up killing somebody while they was in prison, and still was able to be found suitable by the parole board and go home. So nowadays, if you happen to have a loved one anywhere in the California prison system, like I was telling you earlier, the it's more in our hands now than ever, in terms of whether we will get a date or not. But you still have a lot of guys in there, even though they know they got life and they're giving out dates now. You still have guys doing things that is extremely detrimental to them getting a parole date. You have guys in there that still want to play with cell phones, be on cell phones, smoke weed, and drink Pruno, and engage in activities that, if they're caught, their stay is gonna be extended. And who knows how long this window is open. You may have some dude who was a lifer get out, come do something, and that will change that whole climate. So it's best to try to come home right now while you can. But one thing, there is a study, in the study definitely shows that people who have served a life sentence, they reoffend at an extremely lower rate than those who haven't. It's called recidivism. I think the recidivism rate for a lifer was somewhere around 2 or 3%, where the recidivism rate for a person who hadn't done life was well over 55-60%. So that's extremely significant. In a nutshell, how I came home was, I went to the board. I explained to them who I was at the time I caught my case, which was a gang member, and I explained who I am today. I told them that today I'm a person who I think things through. I don't act I don't act spontaneously, and I care about myself and I care about others. And it was a conversation of that nature that got me released, as well as many other lifers. The last time I checked, I believe in 2020, somewhere over 1,400 lifers were released. It was about 18% of the lifers who had parole hearings, which is still not a lot. The only big difference between now and maybe 10 years ago is the governor now is allowing, when the parole board finds somebody suitable, the governor now is allowing that suitability finding to stand about 82% of the time, as opposed to, like I say, when Governor Gray Davis, they was when someone was found suitable, they would automatically revoke it, and they was doing that 99% of the time, and so that's the big difference. So a lot of people always ask, man, how I had life and how I came home. So it was a combination of many things. Like I said, the parole board system was revamped. There was a lot of lawsuits that was ruled upon that made it more likely for a person serving a life sentence to be found suitable at his parole hearing, in the event he also was willing to change his behavior and act like coming home was important to him. So, in the event you happen to have somebody that's locked up, I strongly advise them, to change their behavior and try to come home, because it's great out here. And then also there are a few other newsletters that I used to read while I was in prison on a regular basis, because these newsletters had a lot of informative information in terms of what a lifer needed to do to try to gain his freedom. And one of these newsletters was called the California Lifers Newsletter. I forget how often it comes out, but you can Google it, research it, and you can get a subscription for, if you have someone who's incarcerated, or even for yourself. And also it was something else that was called the Prison Legal Newsletter. And that was pretty much the same thing. It pertained to laws and things that related to lifers, and things that they needed to do to help them gain their freedom. And also talked about many lawsuits that was filed that was also affecting lifers in a positive and a negative manner. And so there was another thing that was called the Life Support Alliance. And it was another newsletter that was basically the same thing. It talked about all these things that would be helpful in freeing the lifer. And so that's pretty much it right there. And like I say, I got a lot of requests for this, especially there was a guy named Ezequiel Rivera, I believe his name was, man. So shout out to you for suggesting that I do a story like this. If you guys got something that you want me to do a story on, and I believe it's interesting and it will appeal to a majority of people, then I'll definitely do it, man. But like I say, you guys that got family, loved ones that's locked up, tell them that they need to be responsible enough to act and behave like they want to come home, because now today it's really, really, really up to the person doing time. If you stay out of trouble, I even seen many dudes go to a parole board hearing and be found suitable to come home on their very first hearing. 10 years ago, that was unheard of. It was unheard of. It was unheard of. And so, nowadays it's happening all the time, man. And like I say, who knows how long this window of opportunity will be open. So tell your family and your loved ones to take advantage of it, man. That's my story. I'll be back for y'all, back with y'all Monday with some more good stuff. I went to Virginia, hollered at Banky Pound. I was on a little bit of vacation, so I was unable to upload a whole bunch of stuff like I wanted to for y'all. But y'all already know it's coming. The stories is coming, and we gonna rock with it, man. I got some good things coming up for y'all. So once again, resume normal program.